it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to day 18 of my 2022 holiday card series. Today I'm going to be making a card using Hello Bluebird's Dear Santa. So I've stamped those images out on some Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, and I'll be coloring with my Copic markers. So I wanted to do the critters in some really warm tones. So I'm starting at the bottom with my dog, and I'm using the E30s for him. So kind of going for like a golden retriever type look. So I'm using E30, E31, E33, and E35. Starting with that E35 to lay in my shadows down the left-hand side of his body. It's going to be the same for all three of these critters in the stack since they're all facing toward the right, and then it'll be reversed for the little bird. So once I have that E35 laid in, I'm coming in with the E33 and pulling that color out a bit more. And then I'll come in with the E31, and honestly, if you wanted to, you could probably just use these three darkest shades, but I wanted to have a little bit more kind of variation, especially on like the muzzle and the lower part of the feet and the belly. So I did bring in a fourth shade, that E30, and I'm going to fill in the rest of this guy with that. And I am going to do a second layer of him off screen as well, just so you know. I wanted his ear to be slightly darker, so I went in much more heavy-handed with that E35 and then blended it out with the E33 and used the E31 for the lightest. For the other ear, I just colored it in with the E35 because we only see a tiny sliver of that. Then I'm moving on to the cat, and I wanted to do kind of like a golden tabby. So I went with YR20, YR21, and YR23. So for the cat, I'm starting with the YR23 for my shadows, again on the left-hand side there, and then any place else where they would go, like between the head and the shoulder, and so on. Then I'm going to blend out with the YR21, and then I'll come in with the YR20. For the kitty, I decided to leave some white space on the lower part of the face and the belly, and then the little paws. I wanted to give him some white socks, and also the tip of his tail. I kind of decided that as I was already starting to color his face, so I did pull in the colorless blender to push some of that color back so I can get more of like a circle look around his muzzle where that white space is. So I did a second layer on the kitty as well, and then let him dry for maybe 30 seconds to a minute. And then I'm coming back in with my darkest shade, that YR23, and adding in the little tabby stripes. So just doing little thin triangle shapes coming down from the forehead and the cheeks and then down the back. I'm also going to add them to the backs of the legs, just getting smaller as the body part gets narrower, and then also adding in some stripes on the tail. So just to add a little something extra. You could even go darker if you wanted it to, but I just wanted something subtle. And then I used that YR23 for the bird's beak. Then for the mouse, I'm going to my favorite combo of late for mice, which is W00 with E70 and E71. So I'm starting with the E71 and laying my shadows in with that, and also going to color in the tail, and then I blended that out with the E70. Like I mentioned earlier, I wanted to keep these critters really nice and warm toned in this snowy scene that I'm going to be creating. So I like these E70s for the mice because I feel like they just really help them look alive. So I did bring in the W1 to blend the E70 out. I decided to just go a little bit darker and then use that fourth shade, the W00, on the lower part of the face, the paws, the belly, the ends of the tail. And then I am going over to the bird, and because I wanted to keep in those warm tones, I decided to do a robin, but I didn't want to use the same browns as I'd used on the dog, so I decided to go with the E50s, and I used E51, E53, and E55, left his belly blank for now. But while I have those E50s out, I'm going to add in the E57, and then I'm going to do the pole that the mailbox is standing on. I wanted it to look like a wooden pole. So I'm starting with that E57 and laying in some shadows up under the mailbox itself, and then also under that big bow, and then blending out with the E55. And then coming in with the E53. I thought I might save some room for the E51, but I ended up just coloring in solid with the E53. And then I came back in and added some details with the E55 to give it some wood grain texture. It wasn't dark enough, so I'm also going to go back in with the E57. I think actually having those two layers of those little circles and squiggles adds to the wood grain texture as well. Then I'm going to give these guys some rosy cheeks and coloring in little noses and ears wherever it's needed with the RV10 and RV11. I've mentioned it a few times before, but this is not the blush combo that I use most of the year, but in the winter I do really like it because it's a bit more cool toned than my go-to, and I think it suits the chilly weather. It just, I don't know, it just has that vibe to me. So I used that for all of the rosy cheeks, the kitty's nose, and the kitty and mice's ears, and then also the robin's red breast. And then for the mailbox, I wanted to do something different. So I decided to go with a cream colored mailbox. I didn't want to do black and I didn't want to do blue. And so I just decided to do this because it's still in that warm tone and it's just something a little bit different. So I went with E40s because they are a bit duller in shade. They're very desaturated. So I think it works really well for an inanimate object, and it also, you know, is distinct from the warmer browns that I've used on my critters. So I used the E40, E41, and E42, and then I did decide to pull in some E43 for the inside of the mailbox, for the floor of it, and then also to cast some shadows on the inside and also on the open lid. So once I pulled in the E43, I did need to blend that back out again with the E42 and then the E41 just to soften that all. And then I'm going to move on to the flag, and for that I'm using R24, R29, and R39. So I'm starting with the R39 and adding a bit of shading both on the stem of the flag and then also on the top part, and then blending that out with the R29. And then I'll come in and use the R24 for a bit of highlight. And at first I left that bottom part where it's bolted to the mailbox. I left that in the creamy color, but I decided it would probably be made out of the same metal as the flag because it is completely separate. So I'm going to end up coloring that in red in just a minute here. But I'm also going to use these reds for the bow. So I'm going back to my R39 and adding some shading to that where the fabric is gathered and also on the inner parts of the tails. And then blending that out with the R29. And then I'm going to fill in anything that's left with the R24. I do really love this combo for Christmas. I think it almost glows. It just has a lot of depth because of that R39, and then that R29 is just the most perfect red, but the R24 has that little bit of a coral tone to it that just gives it that warmth that is really indicative of Christmas. I also use the R29 and R24 for the holly berries, and then I'm using all 3 shades for one of the envelopes. When we see the back of the envelope like this, I like to put my shading where all of the folds of the paper are to make up the envelope. Then I'm going to color in the 2 stamps using the R29. First I only did one, but I decided to do them both. And then, like I mentioned, I'll go back and do that last little piece of the flag using the darkest 2 shades. And I think it makes more sense to be red. So then I'm going to move on to some greens. I'm using G21, G24, and G28 for my holly leaves, starting with the G28 at the bottom and down the crease, and then blending that out with the G24. And then I'm going to come in with a little bit of that G21 on the top little tips there. And then I'm going to change to a bit of a duller green. I'm going with BG93, BG96, and BG99. I don't use these markers very often, but I really do like the look of them. And I just felt like they really fit with this color palette, with this desaturated green. I think it goes really well with the shade that the mailbox came out as. So I'm going to do one more envelope in this green, and then I'm going to switch to some brighter greens. So I'll have a nice mix of different holiday greens in here, using YG11, YG13, and YG17 for another envelope. So again, just putting those darkest colors where the envelope is folded, and then the highlight at the top and the edges. And then for the last envelope, I decided to go with some pink tones. So I went with R000, R11, and R20. And this time I'm just shading from the bottom up on that final envelope, since we just see the front of it, which is flat. Then I'm going to take BG70 and BG72 for my snow. Again, I just wanted like a different blue than what I would usually reach for, something a bit more desaturated in tone. So I'm starting with the BG72 and just using a tiny bit of that, because a little goes a long way. And then I'm going to blend out with the BG70. The BG70 is super soft, but the colors together, I think, make a really pretty kind of frosty glow on this snow. Then I'll take my black Sakura Jelly Roll pen and get that going. I'm going to go over the eyes of all of my critters. It just makes them nice and bright and shiny again. It also gives them a tiny bit of raised texture. So it just really makes their eyes come to life. And then once I'm done with that, I'm going to trim all of these images out with their matching dies. For the background, I'm taking a piece of Bristol Smooth Surface cardstock, and I trim that down with the Nesting Decal A2 dies from Hello Bluebird. Then I'm taking the MFT Drifts and Hills stencil, and I'm going to hold that in place and blend on a little bit of Evergreen Bough Distress Oxide ink. Just a small amount right at the bottom of the hill. I didn't want this to get too dark, but I just wanted that little bit of deeper shade down toward the horizon line. And then I'm going to blend that out with some Speckled Egg Distress Oxide ink. So I'm making sure that I go over the edge of the evergreen bough and then carry that up toward the top of the scene. And I'm getting a little bit lighter at the top as well, kind of letting that fade off a bit so it's not quite so dark. And just making sure that my blend is nice and smooth. And then I'm also going to take a little bit of that speckled egg and just blend it around the edges at the bottom. So again, I get that frosty glow like I did with my Copic coloring on the snow. So just trying to make that even, and then I'm going to take one of the little snowflakes from this stamp set, the Dear Santa stamp set, and I'm going to stamp that all over the background just to have a bit of falling snow using that Evergreen Bow Distress Oxide ink once again. And then I also wanted to have some white snow, so I'm going to take my Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White. I'm going to put the mask back in place, or the stencil, which I'm using as a mask. And then I'll take a bit of this really nicely pigmented paint or ink. I'm going to add a bit of water to it and mix that up on an acrylic block to make it more fluid. And then I can tap it off the side until I get some nice splatters all over that background that look like snowfall. You could do as little or as much of this as you want, just depending on the look that you're going for. So once I'm done with that, I'm going to set this panel aside to dry, and in the meantime I'm going to work on my sentiment. I'm going for big and bold today, so I'm die cutting the Special Delivery Words die from Hello Bluebird out of some Lawn Fawn Barn Red cardstock. And then I'm going to stamp on the inside of my card. I'm using Lawn Fawn Speckled Eggshell cardstock and Lawn Fawn Walnut ink. And I'm stamping out the bird and the holly again. And then a sentiment that says, "A merry little wish that your Christmas be filled with peace, joy, and love." And now I'm ready to start assembling everything. So I've also trimmed down a piece of Lawn Fawn Craft cardstock to be 4 by 5¼ inches, so just slightly smaller than my card front. And I'm going to add that to the front of my card first. It's kind of like a matte layer. And then I'm going to add my focal panel, which I've added some Scotch 3M foam tape to so that I can have a bit of dimension on this scene. So I'm going to layer that right on the craft piece. And then I can bring in my sentiment, and I'm going to just take my Barely Art Precision Craft Glue, which has that super fine nozzle, so that I can add the glue beads right behind the letters really easily. And I probably could have used my reverse tweezers for this just to make sure that I keep my fingers out of it, but sometimes I forget to use them, so anyway, it's fine. What I love about this word die is that everything is all one piece except for the I in special, the little dot. So it's really easy to put this sentiment together because it's really just one go. I'm going to put that down at the very top of the scene, and then I'll just add a little dab of glue above the I, and I've got my little dot here in my Twiddler's Nook embellishment tray, so I'm going to pop that on using my Studio Katia embellishment wand. And then I'm going to take my largest 2 images, which are the mailbox and my stack of critters, and figure out where they're going on the card, and then I'm going to work my way back to front. So the critters are going to get layered over top of the mailbox, so it looks like the mouse is inserting his envelope in the mailbox. So I'm going to add the mailbox first, just making sure I have that positioned where I want it. And then I can add some glue to the back of my critter stack, making sure to add it to the cat and the mice, their little tails. So everything is going to be adhered down well. And then I'll get that positioned just how I want it and press that down into place. And then I can just kind of decorate the rest of this scene here by adding all these little embellishment images. I'm going to put the bird right at the top of that snowdrift on top of the mailbox. And then I'm going to add some of these little envelopes kind of scattered on the ground. I'm going to put one in the dog's mouth just by tucking it under. And then the holly as well. I'm just kind of figuring out the placement where I want everything to go. But I decided that I wanted that red envelope farther away from the red bow so that I get more pops throughout the scene. So I'm going to tuck the red envelope back behind the dog's tail. and I'll put the holly down behind this dark green envelope over on the right. And then, like I said, I'm going to tuck the lighter green envelope in the dog's mouth. So I'll just carefully pick that out and then pop that right back under. And then I have one more holly leaf. So I was just trying to decide where exactly I wanted that to go. I thought about putting it back behind the red envelope, but it just didn't seem to fit. So I decided to add it over on the right hand side along with the other holly leaves and berries. So once I'm done with all of that, I just want to add a bit more snow to this scene, because right now it looks like it's all falling behind my critters, and I wanted some to be over top of them as well. So I'm using a white Sakura Jelly Roll pen and just adding snow wherever I think it should go. I'm just really careful with my placement so I don't go over like the eyes or the mouth of the critters, but I definitely want to overlap their bodies and also all of the other little images, the cards and the bow and the mailbox and the holly leaves, everything, so that it really looks like the snow is coming down in this scene. So just placing it here and there. You can do as little or as much as you want, just like with the snow in the background. I tried to make mine look nice and snowy without going too crazy. I didn't want it to be a blizzard. But then I wanted to add a bit of Stardust stickles, so I'm going to turn my card so it's easier to add it to my letters. And I'm just doing like the lower part of my sentiment and kind of squirting it out and then using the nib of the bottle to drag it around to just where I want it to go, so that all of the letters are just about even. So I'm going to do that for all of those, and this especially looks pretty once it's dried. It just has a really pretty glow that kind of catches in the light as you tip the card when you open it and all of that. So it's just a nice little treatment, I think, for Christmas time. And then other than that, I just wanted like just a few little spots here, not too much. So I put it on the holly berries and on the stamps. And then I'm also going to put it on the snow. So the snow on the bottom of the mailbox post, and then the top of the mailbox itself, and then right on the horizon line on that stenciled edge. And then once again, I'm just kind of using the nib to swirl it around a bit so it's not just in a straight line there. And that is going to finish up this card. So I will lift that up so you can see how that catches the light. I'll give you another peek at the inside. I think this one turned out really cozy. I love the color palette. It's really different for me, but I really enjoy it. So if you enjoyed it too, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Ring that notification bell so you never miss a video. I post new ones every Monday and Friday. All of the products I use will be listed and linked for you in the description bar below. And if you'd like to keep watching, here is day 18 of the previous 2 years of holiday card series. You can click on either one to check them out. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you had a good one, and I'll see you soon in another video. Bye-bye.